Okay, Cheryl, are you ready to keep the Jeopardy fun going?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, 2 categories to choose from.
I will take relationships for $1,000, Alex.
Okay, Alex, okay. Psychologist Arthur Arund's relationship experiment. How long did it take for 2 complete strangers to fall in love?
Do we have the music?
Ding, 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 ding.
I'm going to say 94 minutes.
You're right.
I'm right?
All right.
Yeah, win the $1,000, you know. So that means it really matters where we spend our time and focus.
It certainly does, and unfortunately a lot of people spend that time in pornography. And today we're going to tackle that on the men's panel under construction right now. Okay, we're going to talk about the prevalence of pornography and also prevention. We know the internet is causing all sorts of issues. Many people are addicted to it, unfortunately. And that's not only outside the church, but inside the church as well. There are so many social issues that go along with that. And to talk about this very important topic, it's not an easy one, guys, but we have Andrew Blackwood, psychotherapist and coach. Good to have you back. Paul Lafrance from HDTV Canada. He's had a number of shows on there, too many to count. Home to Win is one of my favorites, and you're working on a book. It's called I Don't Want to Be an Adult Anymore. It's a self-help book for men. When is it coming out, Paul?
Well, when I get around to finishing it. Thanks for bringing that up. Next year it'll be out.
Okay, we're gonna push you on that. And also, for the first time to our panel is Sathiya Sam. He is the founder of Deep Clean, an organization that helps transform men overcoming pornography. And good to have you here.
Thanks, Greg.
Now, you've had you on the program before, and you talked about your addiction to pornography. Yeah. Is that one of the reasons that drove you to wanting to help guys get free of this?
Yeah, 100%. In some ways, you can't help somebody else if you don't know what it's like to struggle and to wrestle with it. So my journey was about 15 years long, and in my opinion, that's way too long. And so I knew the minute I did get free, I was going to do everything I could to help other people get free in a much shorter span of time, and that's why I created Deep Clean.
And what are you seeing? Are you seeing the results that you were hoping for?
For sure. I mean, nothing's a quick fix in the realm of addictions, and especially with something like pornography. But when people are really willing to actually be real with themselves and dig to the core issues, the results actually are incredible. Yeah.
Andrew, as a life coach and a psychotherapist, you're dealing in the counseling realm. Mm-hmm. Is that one of the things that you're dealing with a lot in terms of people coming in with that problem?
Definitely. I mean, at the core of it, there's always those similar pieces. When we get down to it, it is about esteem, it's about identity, it's about some of those beliefs that keep people stuck. So yeah, I see it, and I like helping people with it.
And I know you deal with people in the church and outside the church.
Right.
And I mean, and the statistics, you know, as I've been researching this, we've been talking a lot about this on 100 Huntley Street, because we want to help people get free of some of the things that are bringing shame, causing problems in marriages. But it says 76% of Christians between the ages of 18 to 24 regularly seek out pornography. And that's according to the statistics from our friends at the Barna Research Group. Are you surprised that it is so prevalent in the church?
No, not at all. I used to think that, because I grew up in church, I used to think that people in church were different than people who are not in church. That's not the truth. We're all the same. And my now working definition of sin, because a lot of people are uncomfortable with the topic, is a soul in need. And we're all souls in need. Mm-hmm. So what you will find in church is what you will find outside of church. And it doesn't mean that we're hypocrites. It just means that we're in the right place because we need all the help we can get.
You'd hope so. You'd hope that it's the right place. But from what I've seen, it's in the church where something that should be able to be talked about openly and honestly, without shame,
right,
is on the surface, seems like, yeah, the church is where you're going to go for help. But I think a lot of people's experience is that that's where it's going to be the most swept under the rug, where it's kind of a very common thing to be like, yeah, I've struggled with this, but I'm good now. I'm good now.
Right, and I stand corrected in that when we are actually being the church.
That's right.
Then you're in the right place.
There's a difference between the religion part of church that we have to look good on the outside, but inside we're pretty messed up.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it should be right? It should be the safest place to go, but it's not always.
No, for sure. And I think that's the whole point is you can do anything you want on the outside. Anyone can put on a facade. But actually the good news of Jesus and the gospel is actually that we can have an experience inside. And once you deal with that, then everything externally starts to manifest regardless.
Okay, we have people watching the program. They've been in the church the whole life. Maybe somebody's watching today that has never been in a church and they're struggling with pornography. So should we be encouraging them to seek out help in the church, or do they have to be careful in what kind of church they go to?
It's a loaded question. I mean, I think you want to find professional help, people that you can be honest with, people who are going to actually help you get to the inner matters. Hopefully that, like you said, that should be inside the church. We would certainly hope so. And if you can't find it in your local church, then I would say go somewhere else to find it. But one way or another, you have to be able to get inside and really find out what's going on there.
Paul, do you think we're turning the corner on making the church a safer place for people that are struggling with pornography? Because I know when I'm speaking in churches and, you know, especially if it's a men's event and you invite the men to come forward, and okay, and you're praying and they're telling you what's going on. Pornography a lot of the time is the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it has to start with leadership. And the problem that I have seen historically is that the leader has to be someone that's got it together now, right? And I think that's a mistake. I think it's far more powerful to be like, guess what, guys? I'm still struggling with this. I am not 100% free. And that means, like, we're journeying this together. And I think that has way more power and way more ability for the guy sitting in the back going like, oh yes, I'm trying to get over my sin, and but yet I don't want to talk about it because the guy standing up there has got it together now. I think there needs to be, because unfortunately, I don't know what you guys think, but there seems to be a case of like, when we know that you're okay, then we'll allow you to have a voice. Right. Mm. And I think that's a massive problem. And it's the reason why guys will only be free to a certain extent, but not all the way, because it's like you still feel like you're dirty. Yeah. You still feel like you're not there. And I'm going, we have to understand that, like, this is an addiction. This is more addictive than heroin. And I know this one very well. I know this battle, and I've had good seasons and I've had bad seasons, but it is like a very, very difficult thing to overcome. Yeah. Now throw in the shame factor on top of that, and then throw the church factor in on top of that, as in the institutional setup. And you got a mixture for someone that could be hiding this for years and never get free of it.
And here's another statistic from the Barna Group. 68% of church-going men and over 50% of pastors view porn on a regular basis. I mean that's half. Yeah. So, Andrew, how do we get to a point then, okay, there's the addiction issue, as Paul talked about. It's not something, okay, I'm just not going to do it anymore, and I want to get back on that and some of the things that we can do. But that doesn't even feel safe if the pastor himself is dealing with it. And the majority of pastors say it is causing such destruction in their churches.
You know, I think it's a very complicated topic. And the reality is, I do believe there are different degrees and phases of healing and freedom. And I do think it's important for people in leadership to be at a place where they're free enough to be of service and to give direction and instruction, but also to be so wise and mature to know that we will always be susceptible. That's right. That we will always benefit from having safe people in our lives, having accountability that we choose and that we choose to use. So I grew up in church as well, and I had issues because one of my core values is integrity. I have a very difficult time with people presenting themselves as something that they are not. Mm. So yes, I would much prefer someone to be honest, to say that this is what I'm struggling with, but there's a big difference between saying this is what I'm struggling with and saying this is how I am keeping myself safe, this is how I'm doing this is how I'm taking care of myself, this is where the Lord has me, these are the measures that I'm taking. Because what you experience and your degree of freedom, it's like as you lead, how do you lead? Where do you lead from? And I think that is important.
Yeah, if I can just jump on that, I was part of an accountability program when I was trying to get free, and my accountability partner was struggling just as bad as I was. Mm. And so I'd get a list of all the stuff that he looked at the end of the week, and I would feel tempted by the list. And so it's the irony of a lot of
That's hilarious, isn't it?
Yeah.
I heard that, yeah.
Yeah, and all these programs we set up are all dealing with the behavior. They're quite reactive and reactionary, and we're not doing anything preventative to actually get to things at a root level. And I think it's especially prevalent in the church because if you don't have to be accountable for what's going on inside, it is a lot easier to say, I'm struggling, and there we go, like I was vulnerable and I got it out there, instead of actually figuring out why am I struggling and being willing to kind of go on that journey and figure it out.
But I think probably one of the most important things is, again, putting it out there and being real about this struggle. Because I don't think unless you understand what the effects of it are. It's like we can look at alcoholism or drug addiction and it's kind of like clear, but we don't understand what it does to the mind. We don't understand the effect it has on families. Because we are being completely desensitized culturally by media, which is just, we are living in the most oversexed media, pummeling your mind with images every second of the day. Yeah. So in that respect, I think it's like, hey, let's lose the shame factor. Let's understand that we're living in like this. We wouldn't, if somebody was getting shell shocked by bombs going over their head in a war-torn country, you wouldn't be like, you should be ashamed for, like, it's the same thing. We're being attacked in our minds. And I'm going, when you understand that this is the struggle that is happening across the board. I was in a hotel room last night, showed up, tired. Do you not think that thought entered into my head last night in a hotel room? Yeah, it did. It's irrelevant to the fact that we're going to be talking about it here today. But it's a decision that has to be made, but it makes it so much easier when you understand the effects of it and you're not afraid to talk about it.
Well, and I mean, it is causing problems in, marriages and relationships. I mean, pornography, as it's being, people are viewing it, 300% more likely to cause marriage infidelity. It causes, all sorts of these issues. 42 million porn websites. That's insane. And I'm hoping as we're doing this show, because it's almost like we're this, little kind of tiny program trying to do this thing because there's millions and millions of websites that are going the other direction. So Sathiya, are you feeling confident that at least as we're talking about it in the church and saying, you know what, it's a problem in the church, let's deal with it?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're making progress for sure. We have a long way to go. And the biggest void right now is safety. People don't feel safe to talk about it. And I think that goes back to what we've been talking about. You have to have leadership who are giving people permission. And I think one of the best ways, of course, is modeling it. But you don't have to have a struggle yourself to give permission for other people to be safe either.
That's true.
And so I think we are heading in that direction. The message of vulnerability is kind of loud and proud these days, which is good. So we're going in the right direction, but definitely a long way to go. Like the stats speak for themselves. We don't have this thing figured out by any means.
Andrew, are you hopeful? I mean, when in your practice and you're talking to men, are you seeing some of these guys get freed and improving their marriages and as dads?
Definitely. I'm very hopeful because at the end of the day, I do believe God gives us the help, the grace, the power to be free and to live free. And whether we're talking about someone being unfaithful through porn or being a alcoholic or whatever it is, we have the ability to understand our own journey. And I think there's so much freedom that comes with that. And I know a lot of people have experiences when they, I grew up calling it deliverance. They were delivered and they never had an issue before or after that, but that's not everyone's story. It's true. So sometimes the long journey through healing, like my own experiences in life, I've always gone the long route where I understand, I say, okay, this was connected to that event, this was connected to that, and that caused me to believe this, and that caused me to feel this way. And going through that process really helped me not to be judgmental. How can I judge someone when I know that I'm susceptible and I've been there, and if it's not the same exact issue, I know that I'm just as human as the other person. So sometimes the long route is the blessed route, and you can then walk with people through their pain, through their struggle, without judging them.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, some things, there's a deliverance. I know when I came to Jesus, I stopped swearing, but I still had a bit of a temper. And at times you have to, you still have to work on some of these things. Lost men will probably deal with it until the day that they die. But there is hope. So, Sathiya, tell me about your ministry. Give a website, because we want to provide practical help to people that are struggling with pornography.
Yeah, for sure. The website's just my name, sathiyasam.com. And the program I do, Deep Clean, you can find out more information about it there, but it's just predicated on this, helping men get free through a coaching process. And it's based on the principles I use to get myself free.
Good. Well, thank you guys for joining me. And we have a secret weapon. It's called prayer. And we believe in that. And if you're struggling with pornography today, we'll pray with you. These are not professional people. We can direct you to professionals. But prayer is something that, God uses as we bring it to Him. 1-866-273-4444 is our prayer line. And because of the sensitivity of pornography, you can also email us at prayer@crossroads.ca.
So love hearing from our men's panel, so much wisdom there. And hey, listen, we know that porn is not just a male problem. Nowadays with accessibility, both men and women are struggling. If that's you, want to remind you that our prayer lines are there for you. Give us a call, 1-866-273-4444. We would love to pray with you and maybe help you start on a new journey in this new year. Well, a while back, we produced a documentary on the Bible. One question that was explored was, what would be the main message of the Bible? If you're wondering that, take a listen.
While debate continues about the specifics of interpretation, perhaps the most obvious question is, what is the Bible's main message?
I think the main message is love, not only God's love, but that you should love other people too.
The main message of the Bible would be God's pursuit for His people, just how He always pursues them, even though they reject Him a lot and they fail Him a lot, He will always just keep pursuing them.
God's redemption, God's love, God working and interjecting Himself into the lives of His creation to bring them back to the relationship that He originally established in the Garden of Eden so long ago.
The main message is redemption. Jesus Christ died for our sin to save all humanity.
God is love. I think that it's throughout Scripture. I think from beginning to end, from Genesis to Revelation, Old Testament, New Testament, it doesn't matter. You can see the grace of God and God's love kind of tethered throughout the books of the Bible.
The Bible tells us a lot about human beings, who we really are, and I think the Bible hits the nail right on the head. We were made in God's image, so we have so many things that we share with God, our intelligence, our interests, our love for this and that, our ability to appreciate beauty, and we also have a free will. We can think about things, we can make decisions.
I think the message of the Bible, the dominant, ruling, basic message of the Bible, that we're called by God to run God's world as God's agents. I got that from the first page of the Bible. I think that's the most sublime mandate that humans can imagine.
It's a message of love for every human being who has ever lived, from the God who created them, who knows them intimately, and who desperately wants them to know how much He loves them. What could ever be more relevant than that? Literally nothing.
Well, the bestseller is the Bible, and all this month we want to get the Passion Bible into your hands. You know, it's not only important to be reading the Bible, but allowing the Bible to change us. So get the Passion Bible. Give us a call, 1-800-265-3100, or you can go online to crossroads.ca/passion with a suggested gift of $45. Allow God's Word to change you. Well, our Maggie John is taking a 3-month sabbatical, but don't panic. Over the next 3 months, we will be hearing from Maggie. And coming up right now, we have busy mom Morgan Tyree and sharing with Maggie how we can take back our time.
As we begin the new year, for many of us, getting our time back and being organized is a big goal. Well, all this week, my friend Morgan Tyree, author of Take Back Your Time, Identify Your Priorities, Decrease Stress, and Increase Productivity, will be giving us tips on how to start the year off right. Hey, Morgan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Okay, so why is it important to go into the new year organized?
Well, I think we all crave to be more organized, and there's this feeling at the beginning of the new year to just kind of have a fresh start, and we come off the holidays to press that reset button, and being organized is something that we all sort of kind of are always wanting to achieve, because it gives us a sense of peace and it helps us to save time, money, and energy. So it's a natural time that we just sort of kind of all get that renewed sense of energy to go for it. So it's a great time to do it.
Yeah. You also say in your book, which I thought is interesting, having too much time can be just as challenging as having too little time.
Yes, and I know that can sound a little strange to hear, because I think for so many of us, we struggle with the opposite challenge of feeling like our schedules are maxed and that we have so much going on. But I do think there's times where we could even have a Saturday where we look ahead and there's nothing planned or scheduled, and then all of a sudden half the day kind of just gets away from us, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's important to still be intentional, even when you might have a day that's maybe underplanned. And so it's important to kind of always work on having a sense of intentionality and having a sweet spot with your schedule. And so having a sense where you schedule enough so that you keep a mindset of really keeping your time scheduled. And so you are productive, but not necessarily kind of just letting time get away from you as well.
Having some sort of structure.
Exactly.
You also talk about identifying what season you're in. What do you mean by this?
So I think we walk through different seasons of life based on whether it's the work we're doing or our family dynamics, and there's an ebb and flow to life. And if you can begin by acknowledging your season of life and sort of recognizing maybe the different challenges you have or the amount of things on your plate that you're working through. And that is just kind of an acceptance piece, because you will have certain seasons of life that they'll allow you to do certain things, where in other seasons of life, you may have different abilities and more time available. And so by just accepting that or recognizing that, you can lay certain things down in one season and then maybe pick them back up in another season. It can actually be freeing and also kind of allow you to navigate each season more effectively.
Yeah, just being realistic with what's in front of you. So you say there are seasons, there are different seasons. There's growing, there's pruning, resting, and waiting. Explain those for me.
Yeah, so I mean, we all go through different seasons. And I, for example, was overseas for a 3.5-year season. And I realized throughout that season that it was very much a waiting season for me. I kind of had a season where I hit different roadblocks, and I struggled with finding my purpose for a lot of different reasons. And I felt like the Lord sort of had me in a season of waiting. And while it wasn't that I didn't have fruit from that season, but I did have to lay down some things and I had to be more patient. And so again, by acknowledging that, it kind of gave me a different sense of peace. There's other seasons where you may be being stretched, and that's going to be challenging in its own right. Or you may be having to grow and push yourself past your comfort zone, whatever God's calling you to do. So again, if you can acknowledge what the Lord's pulling you through or pushing you to do, it's going to help you to rise to the occasion.
Okay, I want to get to clutter, because I think around this time of year, we've opened all our Christmas gifts and we have too much stuff. Let's just be honest, and first world problems. So you talk about there's physical clutter, mental clutter, as well as emotional clutter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a professional organizer, and so I see firsthand so much of what my clients struggle with. And we often think of physical clutter as the main type of clutter, and it really is what we see, is the physical clutter. But beyond that, there's a lot of mental clutter, just the amount of information that we're processing on a daily basis, and then also the emotional clutter that comes with our things or comes with all that we have to process and manage. And so it's important to look at your life and look at what you're having to balance day in and day out, and ask yourself if you are being a good steward of what you're taking on. Are you taking on too much? Because we all only have so much energy and capacity. And so are you being discerning with your yeses and nos? Those are important questions to ask yourself.
They are important questions. Thank you so much, Morgan. Morgan, you're going to be joining us all this week, giving us great tips. Tomorrow, we're talking about our schedules and prioritizing and what our priorities are this coming year. Thanks again, Morgan.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
You know, when it comes to the Bible, a lot of people are going, wow, that book is way too intimidating for me. Well, we're going to get back to the basics of learning God's Word. And here's teaching pastor from Oakville, Karmyn Bokma.
We're talking about the Bible, what it is and how we can read it. And maybe for you, when you even hear the word Bible, what comes to mind is, I don't even understand what I'm reading, or there's so many rules that I don't need someone else telling me how to live my life. Or maybe as you engage with the Bible, what you see are horrific acts of violence and stories of suffering, and you say, how can a God who's supposed to love us have stories like this? But we want to invite you into engaging with what the Bible actually is. And what it is it's actually telling a story from start to finish. And let's take some time and talk about what this story actually is. It's the story of God and humanity and how He desires to be in relationship with humanity. And that includes us. So let's dive a little deeper into the story arc. What exactly is it? People who've studied the Bible have divided the story into a few parts, or acts if you think of a play. And understanding these helps you know what story you're reading. Even if you've opened to a random page, it's all part of one story. So the first act is creation. That's that first book of the Bible, Genesis. Those first few chapters are telling the story of how God intended our world to be. It was the kingdom of God under His rule in perfect harmony with Him as everything was created. But quickly, Act 2 comes into play, and that comes in the very beginning of Genesis, chapter 3. This is what we call the fall. It's when brokenness entered the scene because humans decided that maybe we know better than God, and they made choices that caused a brokenness. And the result of this is brokenness and hurt in all relationships, with creation, with each other, with humans, and with God. And this is brokenness that we still see today, and this is where the main theme of the big story enters. See, God kicks into action a rescue plan to restore relationships with people, because His intention was always to be in relationship with them as it was in creation. So we have creation, we have fall, and then this third act is the story of a people group that God would call His chosen people, and how He pursues them and is in relationship with them. And this is essentially the rest of the Old Testament, how they related to Him, how He related to them, and the brokenness that maybe ensued in the midst of that. And then starting at the beginning of the New Testament, we have the life of Jesus. The Gospels, those first 4 books in the New Testament, are telling us about Jesus, and He actually is the culmination of the rescue plan that God had intended all along. And after the life of Jesus is Act 5, and this is the story of the church, and actually the story of us. This is where we still find ourselves. How do we learn to understand who God is, how to follow Jesus, and what this means for our life? And the collection of letters in the New Testament are how we understand how the early church did that. And then that final act is still yet to come. And there's one book at the end of the New Testament called Revelation, and it's pointing to what God intended, the return of Jesus, His kingdom being fully realized. And so as you engage with the Bible, know that you are reading a story that tells God's desire to be in relationship with each of us, including you and me.
Thank you so much, Karmyn. That was a great map of just what the Bible is, because sometimes it's a little intimidating to crack it open. And I think being the year of the Bible, this could be a really good time for people to open the Bible for the first time, or maybe for the first time in a long time, and start reading. And man, that can really change your life. But the advice I would give you, honestly, is start in the book of John in the New Testament. Just look for John. Start there. Lots of great stories about when Jesus was here, a lot about how we should live our life and who He is, and if we're supposed to be like Him. How do we know if we don't actually read about who He was?
Yeah, and then when you understand who Jesus is, then you go back into what we call the Old Testament, the Old Covenant. It all points to Jesus. Now, when I started reading the Bible for the first time many, many years ago, I started in Genesis, and by the time I got up to Leviticus, I was starting to tire out. So good advice, Cheryl Weber.
John, the book of John, absolutely.
It's about Jesus.
Well, I'm pretty excited because I won Jeopardy today. I'm not bragging, I'm just saying.
You did great.
And I'm ready for my prize now. What was it, $1,000?
It was $1,000.
Check or cash?
Yeah, well, it's actually in Monopoly money. And I will be getting that and get out of jail free card in case you ever need it. Anyway, have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a member of the Canadian Council of Christian Charities. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 4M2.
Cheryl Weber's wardrobe provided by Melanie Lynn. Deeks Insurance is a proud sponsor of the 100 Huntley Street studio.